Hi, Christina. How are you today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
So today I'm joined by Kristina McMillan. She's an EIR, entrepreneur in residence over at Scale Venture Partners, and she has remind me, you have a focus on go to market as well as AI. Is that right?
That's correct. Actually, it's executive in residence. And yes, I have been in and around go-to-market for all of my career, but with everything that's changing, my specific remit at Scale is to focus on how go-to-market can adopt AI to improve their motions.
Okay. Well, thank you for correcting me for one. So
Sure.
as an executive in residence, what is that? What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, it's kind of like an operating partner model for anyone familiar with how VCs support their portfolio companies. We're basically an internal consulting organization that is available to the portfolio, and our remit is to help our go-to-market portfolio leaders grow their organizations faster.
So with your portfolio, every venture firm has a different focus. Can you tell me a little bit about the asset class or maybe verticals that you're investing in?
Yeah, we make invest Series A and Series B investments across many different verticals from robotics, but we do have quite a few that focus on AI.
Okay, cool. So I always think about revenue operations touching like B2B SaaS. And over the last 10 years, I think the message has been if you bring in revenue operations, it will accelerate your growth much faster. I'm curious, where do you see or where are we? Are we there yet in terms of revenue operations being put in as a staple function across your portfolio?
Yeah, I definitely, well, I see it all throughout tech SaaS. I think at earlier stages, we see it grow once they get to a certain size. So certainly by Series B, some Series A may have it as well. But I think that where I see it organizations working better is when they invest in the concept of not having siloed operations. I think that fundamentally that original um, reason that RevOps emerged is still very strategic, and so the organizations that invest in that early certainly have the best odds, as you know, many of the RevOps folks listening know.
So when I speak to founders or go-to-market teams, the very first thing I try to do is a go-to-market maturity assessment. It's a fancy word for saying, okay, well, where do you want to get to? Where are you today?
Yeah.
And trying to identify the state of the mess and how many calories it would take to expend to go move towards that next state. So I think that's super interesting. Um, okay, and is it very much the case that when you see different verticals, revenue operations is, one of the first things they invest in? I've never been in robotics. I'm curious if they're investing in the
Okay.
function.
I mean, I have seen some robotics organizations with RevOps. It really kind of comes back to who they're targeting and what stage they're at. But yeah, we are seeing RevOps start to become more ubiquitous across all our portfolio and others.
So in addition to revenue operations, you mentioned AI. AI is a fairly newish term, or actually newish practice that's being brought in. I'm curious about the catalyst for bringing in AI and some of the use cases you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, well, I would say it has started off as like grassroots DIY across the board. Like we've just recently conducted some research on the state of go-to-market AI, and the one thing that it shows us across the board is that everybody's using it. But when we double click on that, it's about two-thirds of go-to-market organizations, particularly leaders, are using it regularly, meaning like daily and or weekly. But as we further double click on that for what they're using it for, the number one use case is productivity. So in marketing, that might be things like content creation or market research. In sales and sales development, it might be things like account research or preparing messages to outbound. Um, all of those are sort of on the individual productivity level, so they can use just LLMs. Like it doesn't require a lot of hooking to different things. And so that has become pretty much table stakes for most organizations. But once we move beyond that individual level, those use cases that now involve things like connecting systems and or multiple systems or developing agents to orchestrate actions, like this is where we need something like RevOps to help us facilitate not only the design of that strategy, but then the execution with things like go-to-market engineers.
So, first off, you have a report coming out at the time of this
Yes.
recording. It hasn't come out yet, so this is a bit of early preview. But by the time folks are listening to this, it's hopefully been out for a couple of weeks. Just a
Yeah.
caveat. You mentioned the category, productivity. You mentioned integrations, agents. When you talk about developing like a categorization of use cases, like what are those categories?
Yeah, I look at them right now as we see three levels emerging. Level one is that individual productivity level. That's like any old person can just take whatever they're working on, plop it into an LLM, either make it more well written, make it more personalized, whatever it might be. It just helps save time. Like that is largely the biggest savings there in level one. And again, that's the lowest complexity. Doesn't involve a lot of integrations, fairly low risk, as long as you're not putting, confidential or other such PII into it. That's like a great place for any individual or leader to start. From there, level two, it steps up in complexity. That's where we start connecting systems. That's where we might be doing things like analyzing transcripts from Gong to try to figure out coaching insights for a rep. So it requires somebody who not only knows how to use the LLM, but how to craft an output that is useful and relevant. And so we not only step up in the complexity of the technical piece of it, but also an understanding of the best practices that we want to layer in to help us do bigger, faster, stronger things with AI. Then, as we step up into level three, complexity increases. More of the same that you imagine. We're starting to look at cross-functional things. So, if level one is the individual, level two might be the department or team level. Level three becomes more function and or cross-functional across an organization, and that's where we start to look at things like we need to have a better sense of data, privacy, security, et cetera.
Oh, that's super interesting. So some of the products that we're using today in our go-to-market infrastructure, they're adding AI into their functionality. Um, and obviously the chat interface is another one. I'm curious, revenue operations leaders today, they're so overloaded already within their remit. I can personally feel that it's overwhelming to now add a new capability on top of a skill set that we've probably honed over the last 10 years. Now you're asking us to retread or retool. What are some of the folks in your portfolio? What are they doing to maybe stay at the bleeding edge and learn?
Yeah, I mean, this is where the go-to-market engineer comes up. And I know that, on LinkedIn, there's a lot of like, is it hype? Is it real? Like, do you really need a go-to-market engineer? And my answer is yes. And that's because of the fact that RevOps has so many other fish to fry, right? Managing processes, planning, all kinds of things. AI cannot be a side of desk thing for a RevOps leader. It's a specialized function that requires somebody who's staying up to date on the models, who's understanding what new tools are coming out, who's understanding that, the latest release is going to basically like allow them to build a thing that they couldn't build 3 months ago. And so having someone like a go-to-market engineer that marries the technical capabilities with the subject matter expertise allows RevOps to then set the strategy and that go-to-market engineer to be responsible for execution. So I think that it's an opportunity for RevOps to really like step up and step into the light with as everyone's figuring out AI to be able to be the holder and the arbiter of that strategy.
I think that makes perfect sense. So the go-to-market engineering talent pool, I have to imagine it's not very
No,
robust. Um,
no.
so where do you see that talent pool growing? Like, do we have to start investing in educating kind of newer entrants into the workforce? Because I hear this all the time. AI is making it very hard to go get a job for new
Yeah,
grads. I
yeah.
think it's a wonderful talent pool, maybe to train up.
Absolutely. I actually think the go-to-market engineering role can be interpreted in many different ways. There are some folks that are leaning into, hey, that's what I've always hired for in my RevOps team. Somebody who has a little bit of coding experience, who has that subject matter expertise with sales and marketing. But the reality is, there's a lot less of those. There's a lot less of those that have both of those, and so I'm seeing a lot more go-to-market engineers come in as very early career stage, and so with RevOps owning the strategy, they can bring some of that subject matter expertise to upskilling those folks that may not have that existing go-to-market experience, but they can come in and bring the technical piece to be able to execute that strategy. So I think these can be lower to mid-level folks depending on what you're trying to solve for, but it doesn't have to be finding that perfect, sparkly, glittery unicorn somewhere in the ecosystem candidates. You can absolutely bring this person in and mold them into what you need them to be. The key is they need to be focused on it. That's what we want folks to is again, I can't be part of someone's job, kind of has to be the job. Because as we build our own solutions, we're creating technical debt, right? We have infrastructure around those, we have integrations and connections that need to be maintained. Model changes all of a sudden break the outputs. So like we need somebody staying on top of the hygiene of our AI implementations to make sure that they're still yielding the value that we want from them. And then between those go-to-market engineers and RevOps, we need to have real conversations around what we should build versus what we should just buy. Obviously, for small things like drafting content, we can do a lot of that stuff with the broad LLMs today. So we don't need to buy a solution that does all these tiny little level one use cases, if you will. But as we get to things that are a little more complex, things like AI for territory planning or managing accounts and redistributing accounts, we could build that, but it's going to be a little bit more complicated. It might not be a thing that we want to maintain, especially if there's a vendor out there that can continue to build a best of breed evolving solution. Like that might be a case where we go buy. So those conversations are constantly evolving around AI, especially as new vendors come on and as new releases happen with the models.
So I always tend to think of this thing called like price discovery, right? So we're trying to figure out, what's truth, what's fact from fiction, what's good versus great versus best. And with all these new tools, I even have a hard time sifting through. Do you think we're in a period of musical chairs for a time until the dust settles? And if so, does that fundamentally reform, what the go-to-market stack looks like in the future? Because I'm using Zapier more than I've ever used it
Yeah.
before. I'm using N8N, and I
Yeah.
sometimes feel like I'm creating more sprawl and more debt than I would like to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the crux of the challenge right now, and I don't think we can skip past that. So I think it's really important for folks to know that no perfect stack has emerged, and so experimentation is absolutely the phase that we're in. And the key is to figure out how you can experiment in a nimble way, right? So I see folks signing much shorter contracts. I see longer paid POCs just so that we can like use that as a way to really see, is this going to solve the problem for us? And it gives us time to like have a right now solution and then reassess in 6 months or whenever, because so much is changing. That said, I think you can't skip level one. Everyone in your organization needs to upskill on some level on how to do the basics with AI. And that opens up your imagination for, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? And then we run down those paths and we realize, okay, this I want, it's worth doing, it's high priority, it's going to be valuable to the organization, but building it is a little bit harder than we thought. Let's go look for a solution. And so you can't skip those parts of the experiment, right? To be able to figure out what's going to be right. And so I don't think that's a bad thing, but signing shorter contracts, doing, meatier POCs to really assess whether or not it's going to work are the ways that I'm seeing people do that today.
So I want to shift attention to some of the economic implications of bringing in AI, right? So folks use phrases like AI, it can cut out headcount. I also maybe see it in an exhaust metric like dollar ARR per FTE. What's the fundamental thesis behind AI on its impact on some of those economic metrics?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We talk a lot about metrics in our upcoming report because many folks saw, the headlines around 95% of AI pilots fail. Well, first of all, not 100% were ever supposed to succeed. So there's some, like portion we always knew was going to be experiment, and you choose to do it or choose not to. And so, but it's getting everyone to talk about the ROI piece of it. And what we're seeing is like kind of two phases of adoption emerging. Well, one that we're all in is the productivity phase. We absolutely all just started digging in and figuring out what this looked like individually, and hence our level one tends to have use cases tend to have the highest adoption. And so how do you measure productivity? For most of us, we're like hand wavy, it saves the reps time. I've seen some teams do this better. Some really great RevOps leaders talk about things like doing time studies to be able to better articulate a before and an after, and then setting a goal of saving X hours per week per rep. So like we're trying to quantify these things as well as we can. But the hard part is AI initiatives are like there's just a lot of them everywhere. It's just scattershot. So how do you know if anyone's working? That's where we are recommending folks zoom out and look at things like net new ARR per dollar of go-to-market expense and per go-to-market employee. So most folks in SaaS have tracked things like revenue per employee, but that can mask a lot of things. Let's say go-to-market is experimenting. Is it working? Because we're the ones on the hook for revenue. Can we ratchet down to like, are we getting more done with less resources? So absolutely, like bringing AI in can step us up both on the productivity side, but also on the quality side. So phase two after productivity is now looking at how do we apply AI to improve the quality of what we do. So I mentioned a rep coaching use case. I'm love seeing these use cases now where um, reps, SDRs are analyzing every call or multiple calls to recognize the patterns for that individual on what they do well and what they can improve. And that is directly translating to higher conversion, higher win rates. It is moving those metrics that we're used to measuring, but that productivity loses because productivity is sort of so far removed from those things. Just doing more does not yield better. And so I expect every organization to have to step up the more that they're doing. Like our research is showing that within 2 years, every go-to-market leader expects productivity to increase by 30% or more.
Wow.
That's a lot. Like we're raising that lower bar. Now to capture that, and Tim Sanders over at G2, he's their chief innovation officer, but he runs their AI research practice, has published some great stuff on this that talks about Parkinson's law, which is the idea that if you allocate a period of time to a human to do a task, it will take that long. And if you do something to save them time, they save time, but the task still takes that long. So how do we capture that time savings? You move the goalpost. You either bring in the deadline, for example, you up the quota, whatever it is. Once we've given people an opportunity to operate at this new level, then our goals need to change, and that will change some of our downstream metrics. So, productivity first, we have to step that up. We have to operate at that new level in a consistent way, and then we can start to change things that might improve our outcomes. But there's also use cases specifically that can improve them. So, not just use cases to increase number of activities or save time, but use cases that help us make better decisions. So, on the marketing side, I'm seeing some really cool things about analyzing campaign behavior and performance to determine, should we do more of this or more of that types of stuff, or stop doing certain activities. In sales, I mentioned the coaching piece. I expect these creative ideas to continue to flourish into how do we get the most out of that human than we ever could before.
So a couple of things about that. I always think about Starbucks and how they measure every piece of activity, and there's a sequence of events happening in
Yeah.
a supply chain. There's also a bit of a supply chain happening at the funnel to win to customer to expansion level to some degree as well. And I think the time study, I haven't seen it done at a lot of companies, right? Like at Google, we did a time study down
Yeah.
to looking at your calendar and referencing it and then rolling it
Yep.
up, and then you had averages, and you can start to see which activities were value added versus not. But there's also the other point. If I'm able to do the same task in less time, some folks would just start later.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen wild research on this. Like, some are like questioning hey, just because we can do it faster, like, why can't some of that savings go to improving quality of life for our employees? And I think that there's a balance. Like, some of it can, but we also need to scoot in and like capture the potential. It's just like an athlete training. You wouldn't ask them to like, just because you can go faster, we want you to keep it under this. Like, I mean, we don't want you to like beat it. I mean, that's crazy. We have to recognize that gain, especially because we're paying for AI to yield the benefits that it's yielding. And so I think that the other thing, so you back to your economics question, the other thing is looking at really truthfully as a team, you can't apply AI to everything. And so you mentioned time studies. Not every organization can do a time study. Like it's a pretty intensive process, especially if you want to get a pretty good baseline understanding across a broad set of people. That's like a pretty significant investment. So time studies are just one way to do it. But another is I'm seeing really cool things of how teams are re-energizing themselves with AI by holding hackathons, marketing teams holding hackathons. And you could call them hackathons, you could call them promptathons, whatever you want. But the idea is we're getting together as a team. We're allowing anyone at any level to say, this is a problem, and I think we can fix it with AI. And then making a business case for it, like, here's what it would save us, here's what we'd get out of it. Let's go try it. And it's this thoughtful, continuous experimentation. So whether it's hackathons, time studies, or even just sitting down and asking your team or your reps or whoever it might be, like, what are the biggest bottlenecks, pain points, et cetera, that make your job harder, less effective, like you can't get stuff done, and just times however many reps, let's go solve that. One cool example that I was really surprised by from a RevOps leader that I chatted with a couple weeks ago was he said, we actually didn't realize it, but our reps just want to live in their inbox. So they said, feasibly, could we figure out how to use AI to make it so that they don't have to go to CRM at all? Now that's a little wild, right? Like because we've been trying for so long to get reps to stay and update CRM. So it's a little wild. But what they did was they just started using AI to deliver things like account summaries and account preps directly to their inbox so that reps could just focus on managing their time so that they were in front of customers more and more and more. The reps loved it. And so it can be very surprising how something small and seemingly minor could actually unlock a lot of other things, right? So that's a fairly innocuous, easy to implement use case that may include some integrations, but it's not too hard. Definitely could be done by a RevOps team and a go-to-market engineer. But what it bought them was rep goodwill. How many times is like we are asking for rep goodwill and can't get it, and that unlocks other things. And so there, it's part economics, but it's also part like re-energizing teams, so that they can focus on the human thing. There's a lot of research coming out too on, AI can take away so many of the minor things that we do that we now need to be mindful of cognitive load of the humans. So if a rep could spend maybe 30% of their time customer facing because of all the other stuff they had to do, AI could feasibly get that over 50%, maybe higher. Now it's like, this is just a very fatiguing job to be in front of customers call after call after call. So it introduces a new set of things we'll need to manage too. But I think we'd all agree it's better. It's better to figure out how we get them in front of customers more often, because that's the job that we really need them to do that a human can uniquely do.
That's amazing. So a couple of things I just want to comment on it. So when it comes to AI, I love the idea of you could vibe code a Chrome extension or something that goes overlays on top of your inbox and bring in all the key elements, right? Like a sales rep wants to know, what am I going to do today? Pre-call, prep, call in call, post-call summarization. All these tools are being
Mhm.
built. The next thing is, you have your internal management cadences. So showing up to your forecast call, being prepared for that so you don't look like an idiot. And then I love the idea of the growthathons or the hackathons. There's a fifth dimension there that's not mentioned, which is culture. You're building a
Mhm.
culture of entrepreneurship or
Yep.
innovation, and that just brings a ton of energy. And I think folks bring their best selves when they're part of a team where, you're all cooking, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone is bringing their best, and I love that. So I always ask this at the end of the show, what's one piece of advice that you'd like to leave for the go-to-market community?
Yeah. I think this will be I think this will be something that it shines some pride for RevOps, which is process is still more important. Like the thing I think that AI has revealed is that garbage in, garbage out. If you don't know what your process should be, AI is not going to automate it better. Like it's not going to all of a sudden tell you the right thing to do if you haven't tested and figured that out yourself. So we're seeing more teams spend more time really documenting their processes and documenting their ideal outcomes. Like, what is it that I want from this process? So that AI can then use that as its starting point. So process is incredibly important, if not more so, as we try to leverage AI in our organizations.
Tried and true. So for those who want to connect with you and learn more about Scale Venture Partners, where can they go ahead and do so?
Yeah, well, definitely on LinkedIn, and I'd love to talk AI with anyone. Like hear stories of what everyone's working on. Also at scalevp.com. Shout out on our website. We have a go-to-market resources portal where we put a lot of our research, a lot of our best practices and things that we're doing with our portfolio. We love to share that with the world. So if it's useful to folks, please go in there and help yourself, and then reach out to me. I'd love to talk shop anytime.
Amazing. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Jeff.